before I let you go, a little Human 101 talk. So I mentioned in one or the other, or maybe both of the episodes on the 5D Collective about copycats. And here's where it's very interesting when you learn from the trauma-informed experts how seriously the movies, they're all these adaptive children behaviors. Like it's one of those things where I didn't scratch my head as a kid and as I was growing up, but now I'm like, wow, we have entertainment that leads people to consistently behave in a way that is a immature emotional response. And honestly, as a teenager, I recognize teenagers being insecure and immature, and we all have emotions. But what I didn't understand was, why would you be so bluntly, denying it to yourself? Because the whole thing of we all have an ego, okay? So we all have an ego self is how I equate it personally, and I still do, especially with knowing that neuroscience talks about our self. Patrick McNamara describes where the self is in our brain, and then there's the neuroscience who wants the ancient of way back when to be the winner. And again, these little, because so anybody who's an actual person who uses the entirety of our brain, and that means it's not personal. So it means that I can tell you I have an opinion and you can tell me you have yours, and I actually, without not even flinching, can say cool. Now the only time this is not as cool is when you're with your tribe, if you will, which is actually very straightforwardly, and I'm talking from a functional adult, integrated, restorative, embodied self experience. So I am a love button is what I like to call it on our episodes, because no matter what somebody will have said, it doesn't change how I feel about myself. You can tell me I'm whatever you want. I still love who I am, and I don't actually care that you don't. And I actually find it very insulting that you could ever deem that you, a human being that's just like me, can say off with your head. So this is the extent. So when I learned about God, I learned about how to respect somebody the way I wanted to be respected, not to ever even remotely cast a stone. In fact, my only one moment of shame, quote unquote, but actuality was when I recognized that the black and white thinking that we have as kids, because our brain works a certain way, plus they will have taught us in twos, was casting stones. I still remember, because it was like, oh my gosh, I had that gasp of how dare I do something that I know is wrong, which is to say, I can say you're bad. No. So the copycat thing, back to that, because see, when you have true emotional confidence and esteem, and it's not in a cocky way, because anybody who's cocky actually has no self-esteem. This is a blunt, straightforward. If you're cocky and you don't know that you have low self-esteem, it's because you don't know how your body works. The attachment system, a lot of things. I can explain it. I'm not going to right now. But when you know the difference between true empowerment versus cockiness, you're going to notice a difference about a person or more. And really, it's how they handle themselves the minute that they're in a situation where you and I aren't seeing eye to eye. So like I was saying, the only people who will have quote unquote an effect, meaning, oh my gosh, I might not be loved, it's our actual, at least for me personally, it was the people that are my circle. In fact, my immediate family, and then the people that I extended to my family. And in fact, I have one of my lovely friends, I still remember, as we aligned ourselves to be able to communicate, it happened 3, 4, 5 different conversations where every time I was like, okay, he still loves me. Okay, I'm not out of his, crew. Like, it was literally like, am I going to be accepted or not? Because I tend to like the person, and so it's self-centered. This is where it's personal. It's personal because I like the relationship. So it's like, am I going to make it through the little loops? But here's where it's not in a way of let me satisfy the person and be what they want. No, it's actually you and I might be different. Are we going to accept each other as different people or not? So it's one of my favorite stories, actually. And I love thinking about how we came to do our lovely little tango dance, and the intellectual conversations are awesome. And we're completely opposite, which is why it makes it that much more enriching. True empowerment means you can have fun. And I was grabbing my cards, and I didn't want to make it into card reading, but having curiosity is what activates your ventral vagal state. And you can only be in a ventral vagal state if you feel safe to be yourself. So that's what the inner growth mindset is all about. That's what everything that IHP is all about. But as a 5D mystic, of course, I integrate the channeling, and I love it because the 5D collective, that's who we're bringing together. But this one I wanted to make a little bit more human, a little less woo-woo, and say, the truth about copycats is that's a sad thing. A person who has confidence doesn't feel happy when you know that a person doesn't have confidence. You feel sad for them. A person who understands, and I was a kid, and again with God, I told God when I would talk to him as an entity, since I was taught of him as an entity, I said, I don't believe in evil, because the psychology people have shown me it's called human suffering, and I think it's quite unfair that your people are actually not listening to the very explicit and very direct. I mean, it's like, I don't even know how they don't know that they're taking control of things, that they're not all powerful, they're not all knowing. The only reason we have still institutions as they are traditional in our history of humankind, but the reality is it's been taught in a certain way, and the people who believe in it, I remember my grandma, and I will always use my grandma because my grandma was older, and so if you are a smart person, you can understand when taken into context how a person won't be able to adapt to something new, because you're actually destabilizing an entire network of subconscious and conscious situations. This is what it means to be smart. If you want to talk to me about being a human, which I've never met unless they're trauma educators and or people who like being a human. So here's why the 5D collective is different than the 4D, because they keep talking about the stars and conspiracies and all these little stories that really keep people. It's like the flat earthers. What are they doing with their brain? I'm sorry. If any of you are that, I'm thinking you have so much brain power. Why are you not doing something to help the environment? So 5D collective, a person, in my book, a person who has true confidence ain't going to be around yelling their head off at somebody. That's the personal part. That's why they're not their spirituality process. It's called being an adult, emotionally speaking, functional adult. Once you can gain confidence, somebody who's copying you, it's a sad story if that's even true. Not to mention the inner child, like Patrick Tiahan pointed out when he's talking about games and how people that don't know they're playing a game, it's not a game. They have what are called safety behaviors, maladaptive responses. Now that they're an adult, it's their adaptive child who's protecting an inner child who had trauma because they didn't feel good to be themselves, which is an attachment system. It's not an insult. Even here, it's not, and nobody that I've met so far, unless they're in the, I want to help people to be their self, so they know about compassion-based therapy. They know about somatics. They know about somatic experiencing. I still remember, I have to share this story. When I met this dude who was a newbie psychologist, newly gotten his degree with his lovely girlfriend, and I think of them too because you could tell they were a codependent couple. And again, nothing against anyone, but when you know that a person can tap into more by basically just tending to themselves in a certain way, kind of feels off for somebody to see somebody who's not a grown-up yet, emotionally, mentally, and physically, and they're flaunting around. So the two are like, oh yeah, we like helping people too. And I was all excited about this new information that I just finished with, I think it was Peter Levine and Diane Heller on somatic experiencing, and everything somatics, my awakened embodied certificate with embodied philosophy. And I was so excited, and I'm talking, and this guy, by the time I'm done, he's very sweet, but he's like, I have a gazillion. He gave me this exaggerated number to contest you. So that was when I was intrigued. Again, here's where a person who has confidence, I didn't be like, oh my God, how dare he? Now I'm like, okay, wow, we don't have time. Can you please? So I'm like, okay, he was leaving. So I said, I won't have time to ask him about all these gazillion ways he can't listen. So I said, hey, could you tell me then how you would handle this? Because I mean, we don't have time to go through all these ways that you have to contest what I just shared with you. And he goes to tell me how he would lay the person down with his little, he describes to me a scene. And I'm like, okay, now I got it. You're fulfilling whoever it is or whatever identity you think makes you look good, makes you feel good. So there's a difference with true confidence, which is here. And it isn't about competition, because otherwise you're not confident. That's the point. If you can't own yourself unconditionally with love, you're not your purusha yet, your piece of consciousness, and you won't be able to tend to your prakriti, your energy body, because your nervous system, you're not actually doing left-right mode at all. And here's where we talk about adults, functional adults, and achieving emotional maturity, because we can, from our brain moving into integration in our nervous system. You can do it very easily if you want to love and do the tango. So anybody who's curious, tune on into the episodes. But we do mix up some woo-woo stuff because I am a 5D mystic. So there you go. And let's build a collective, because I love the 5D educators.